Okay, we will continue from the last video clip because it only can do 10 minutes at a time. Now I couldn't finish it all in that time. Now integer parse int, within that we need to pass an parameter in here. And what would that parameter be? If we want to convert this string to an integer, this is what we pass into it. So we pass the actual variable name str num leaves. Okay, this is the variable name that contains a string that needs to be converted, and it sends it back out. I want you to look at this again. This method called parse int is in the class integer, and it's still in all the Java library. Have a look. Parse int, right? It takes in a string, passes the string argument as a signed integer. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong one, sorry. This is what we're looking for. This is the one. Passes the string argument as a signed decimal integer. So whatever is in the string, it will go through and take it and send it out as an integer. Okay, notice there is a difference between parsing and converting. Now this is sending the integer out, and then you need to, I want you to get used to looking into this Java library documentation and learn how to read this documentation and work out what you can do, right? Now that's why we've passed in a string, type string. I just want to show you what will happen if I make that an integer. Notice the error message, because it is a common mistake, because we are expecting the user to enter a number and we just go and put int in there. Let's look at the error message. Okay, incompatible types. String is expected, but integer. All right. See, it's expecting an integer. This is expecting an integer, but it's returning a string. So if we change that back to string, it should be okay, right? Because you have to, this method returns a string, so you must have a string variable to accept it. Whereas this method returns an integer. So I have a method, I have a variable name integer. Int, see? Okay, now when it returns it, we are inside a method that returns an integer. So therefore, we also have to type in return number of leaves, because this must return something to the calling method, right? And now notice if we leave that out, I'm just going to cut that out and compile it and look at the error message. Missing return statement, because it can see that this method must return an integer and it is not returning, it's giving you that error message. So you can actually type in return number of leaves. Now, because you're just at the early stages of programming, I haven't done this in one line, but you can do this in one line. I will write it here. You can actually combine this, right, and say return that. In other words, remember how a method that returns something, like this is a method that returns something. You can't just let it float in there. You can use it in a print, or you can use it in a calculation, or you can just say return. So the number that this method returns gets sent out of this method, right? So in that sense, you can just do it in one line, but here I've just put it in a different variable so that you can understand it better. That, okay, let's store that in a variable and then let's return that variable. Okay, let's compile that and let's run it. Welcome to Wombat World. Okay. Aha, now you wonder why didn't the question come up? How many leaves would you like? Right? Can you see why it didn't come up? Have a look at. We've written a method called how many leaves. Why didn't it happen? Because this method was not called. We have to call this method to actually make it happen, because everything comes from the act, right? If it's in act, then it will happen. So this is like the main module. When we did the modularization, we had different modules, and this is the main module that calls other modules. So let's actually call this method how many leaves. Okay, but because it is just a method that returns an integer, we cannot call it like we call this method. Because it returns an integer, we cannot do that. So we might decide, hey, let me just take in what the user enters and this method returns, and let me print it out. So we can say system.out.println, and let's print that. Oops. Okay, we can do it this way, right? But if we just call the method on its own, where is it gonna put that value that the method returns? Let's compile that. Now we are actually calling this method, so we should get some kind of output. This is the joy of Java, Greenfoot Java. We always have to compile each time here and place the wombat and keep. Let's do it. Okay. There's welcome to Wombat World. Now we get the question, how many leaves would you like? We will say 10. Okay. Now here is the actual message that we got. 10 leaves. That's what you entered. 10. Right? And each time we finish an output, we can just go here and clear it, so we don't mix it up with the previous outputs.